Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. Today, we're going to be exploring the life of Swami Vivekananda, but not the world-renowned figure. You know we like to go deeper.
Right.
So we're going further back to his early years as a wandering monk across India before he was famous.
Yeah, it's a period that's really crucial to understand his later impact.
Exactly. And luckily for us, we have a great source for this deep dive, a biography written by one of his disciples, Swami Nikhilananda.
Oh yeah, it's full of those intimate first-hand details.
Yeah, it really brings his journey to life.
You can really see his worldview taking shape in these early experiences. You know, his encounters, his struggles, it's all in there.
So let's set the scene. Vivekananda, or Narendranath, as he was known before becoming a monk, had just lost his guru, Sri Ramakrishna.
Right.
And suddenly he's responsible for a whole bunch of young disciples, all grappling with their grief and unsure about the future.
Yeah, it really weighed heavily on him. Ramakrishna had specifically asked Narendranath to guide these young men, toward a monastic life.
So that's a huge responsibility. Where did they even begin?
Well, with the help of a generous disciple named Surendranath Mitra, they were able to rent a place in Baranagore, just north of Calcutta.
Okay.
And it became known as the Baranagore Math, the first monastery of the Ramakrishna order.
Oh, wow.
But don't picture like some tranquil retreat.
Okay.
The book describes it as a rundown, supposedly haunted house.
Oh, so a haunted house turned monastery. That's a pretty cool origin story. What was life like for them at Baranagore Math?
It was austere. Really austere.
Yeah.
Like bare essentials, simple food, hardly any possessions, and just tons of spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Meditation, study, devotional music. They were serious.
Yeah, they were diving deep
Yeah.
into their spiritual development.
Absolutely.
And Narendranath was at the forefront of that, right? Really pushing everyone
Totally.
to go deeper.
He wasn't just leading by example, though. He was exposing them to all sorts of different philosophies,
Oh,
both Eastern and Western. Aristotle, Plato, Kant, but alongside Indian philosophers too. He really wanted them to engage with all these different perspectives.
so broad in their understanding.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fascinating. It seems like he was already challenging those conventional boundaries, even back then.
Oh, absolutely.
There's that story about Christmas Eve at the Baranagore Math that I always think about. Narendranath was recounting the life of Christ.
Right.
And his storytelling was so passionate that it sparked something in his brother disciples.
Yeah, and it's a powerful story. And it shows the deep respect for Jesus within the Ramakrishna order. The disciples got swept up in the moment. They spontaneously vowed to formally embrace monastic life.
Wow. So this time at the Baranagore Math, it was clearly formative, but it sounds like a sense of restlessness kind of started to creep in among those young monks.
Yeah, they were drawn to that traditional ideal of the wandering monk, traveling across India to deepen their self-realization and experience the spiritual heart of the land.
Yeah, putting all that intense study and practice
Right.
into action in the real world.
Exactly. And Narendranath felt it too. He needed solitude to really challenge himself further. And he also saw wandering as a way to encourage his disciples to become more self-reliant.
Okay, yeah.
So Baranagore Math became a kind of home base. And Narendranath started going on these longer and longer periods of travel.
So I'm really curious about those travels. What were some of his most striking encounters during this time?
Oh, there's so many. He traveled through all these sacred cities, encountering a whole bunch of different people, grappling with the complexities of India. One that really stands out is his run-in with a troop of monkeys in Varanasi.
Okay. What happened? Was this some kind of spiritual encounter with Hanuman's army or something?
No, not quite. He actually used it as a teaching moment to teach people about facing life's challenges head-on.
Okay.
He noticed that the monkeys would relentlessly attack anyone who showed fear, but they'd back down if you stood your ground.
That's a great analogy. I mean, he really had this knack for finding everyday lessons in the most unexpected places.
Oh, he did. But it wasn't all profound insights and monkey wisdom.
Yeah.
He also had experiences that challenged his own beliefs, like when he tried to share a smoking pipe with an untouchable man, and he refused.
Oh, wow. That must have been jarring, especially considering his deep spirituality.
It was a real reminder of the deep-seated caste system.
Yeah.
The kind that even he struggled with.
Yeah.
It really highlighted that tension between personal enlightenment and social injustice.
It seems like every encounter, whether it was monkeys or men, it was a learning opportunity for him.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of learning opportunities, his encounters with figures like Tralanga Swami and Pavari Baba, the air-eating holy man, were huge for him.
Wait, air eating. Okay, I have to hear more about this Pavari Baba.
Well, he was known for his extreme austerities. He subsisted on almost nothing, hence the name. But he was also a devoted follower of Sri Ramakrishna and had a pretty fascinating end to his life. A little unsettling, maybe. When he felt his death approaching, he self-immolated as an offering to the divine.
Wow, that's a dramatic display of devotion. So it sounds like Vivekananda was meeting some truly remarkable people on his travels.
He was, and all these encounters had a big impact on him. Deepening his understanding of the diversity and underlying unity of Indian culture. He started to see the beauty and the wisdom in different traditions, but also the social problems that were plaguing his nation.
Did these encounters start to shape his views on what India needed?
Definitely. The poverty and suffering he witnessed really started to bother him. And you can see the seeds of his social activism starting to sprout. He became more and more critical of the rigid caste system, the stagnation he saw within Hinduism, the terrible conditions of the masses.
It's like he was starting to feel this tension between his own spiritual pursuits and the needs of the people around him.
Yeah, you're picking up on something important there. He even began to express admiration for certain parts of Islam, especially their focus on equality and social welfare. He wanted to kind of integrate those elements into his own vision for a revitalized Hinduism.
So it's like he was putting together a puzzle, trying to figure out how to uplift his nation while also honoring its spiritual core. What happened next? How did he deal with this inner conflict?
Well, in 1890, he reached a turning point. He decided to leave the monastery, determined not to return until he achieved this profound realization. And to mark this commitment, he even adopted a new name, Swami Vivekananda.
That's a pretty big statement. It's like he was entering this new phase of his journey, totally dedicated to self-discovery.
Exactly. Yeah. And he even went as far as to tell Sri Ramakrishna's wife, his spiritual mother, that she was his only mother now. It was a symbolic severing of ties, complete dedication to the monastic path.
Wow. It sounds like he was going all in on the spiritual quest.
Oh, he was. But as we'll see, his journey outward eventually brought him back to this deep concern for humanity and this urge to make a real difference in the world.
This is fascinating. It's amazing to see how this period of wandering really laid the foundation for his later impact.
It did. And as we go into the next part of his journey, you'll see how those experiences continue to shape his vision and his mission.
So we've got Swami Vivekananda, as he's calling himself now, wandering all over India, searching for deeper truths, meeting all these interesting people. It sounds like quite an adventure.
It was. And, his understanding of India, it just got deeper with every step he took. And I'm just meaning the ancient wisdom and the spiritual traditions, but also like the real stuff, the social realities, the huge diversity of the land and the people. It was all part of it.
But he didn't just watch from the sidelines. He was really engaging with everyone, from villagers to powerful rulers.
You got it. He wasn't afraid to challenge people, start debate, even stir up a little trouble. There's this great story in the biography about his meeting with the Maharaja of Alwar.
Oh yeah, I remember that. The one who was really into Western stuff. What happened there?
Well, so the Maharaja sees this young wandering monk, and he starts questioning his unusual way of life. And Vivekananda never wanted to back down. He flips the script on him and asks why the Maharaja is always hanging out with Westerners and indulging in luxury instead of, taking care of his duties as a ruler.
That's pretty bold. To challenge a Maharaja right in his own palace. What did the Maharaja say to that?
He wasn't happy about it, let me tell you. And it got even more intense when the Maharaja started making fun of Hindus worshiping images, idols and stuff. So to make his point, Vivekananda asked the prime minister to spit on a portrait of the Maharaja.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine that awkward silence. What was he trying to do there?
He was making a point. With that dramatic move, he wanted to show that even though the portrait wasn't the Maharaja himself, it still represented him, and people would respect it because of that. And then he cleverly connects that idea to images. How they can help people focus on the divine.
That's a pretty smart way to turn it around. It sounds like he got the Maharaja thinking.
He did. The Maharaja was so blown away by Vivekananda's intellect and his quick wit that he actually apologized for being rude earlier.
That just shows you something about Vivekananda. Not only was he sharp and witty, but he was also completely fearless in standing up for what he believed in, even when facing those in power.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how he used humor and intelligence to challenge those in authority and make people question their own assumptions.
It makes me think about how we often don't speak up about our beliefs, especially when facing powerful figures or disagreeing opinions. You know, Vivekananda's courage is really inspiring.
I agree. He teaches us how important it is to speak our truth with conviction and respect, even when it's hard.
So, beyond these individual stories, what are some of the bigger ideas that came out of his travels? I'm especially curious about how his experiences shaped his vision for India.
Well, one key thing he realized was that the true spirit of ancient India, the real deal, was best preserved along the banks of the Ganges.
That's interesting. What made him think that?
He saw a certain purity and simplicity in the lives of the people there, a deep connection to their spiritual roots that he felt was missing elsewhere, and he noticed a kind of mildness in their character, which he saw as a sign of spiritual growth, not weakness.
So he was calling for a return to those core values of Hinduism, instead of just copying the West.
Exactly. He wanted Hindus to study Sanskrit, to really understand their scriptures and to take pride in their heritage. He saw this need for a revival, a going back to their traditions instead of just imitating the West.
But it wasn't just about clinging to the past, was it? He also recognized the value of some Western things, like science and technology.
Right. He wasn't against progress. He thought India could really benefit from advancements in those areas, especially when it came to easing suffering and making life better for people.
So he was looking for a kind of middle ground, a way to blend the best of both worlds.
That's it. He had this vision of an India that was deeply rooted in its spiritual past, but also open to progress and new ideas. And it's something we're still dealing with today, trying to figure out how to handle globalization and cultural exchange. It's still relevant.
Yeah. It's amazing to see how all these ideas started to come together for him during his time as a wandering monk.
It really is. And while these big ideas were brewing, he was also really touched by the plight of the ordinary people, the everyday folks he met. He saw poverty, ignorance, injustice everywhere, and it fueled his desire to make a real change in their lives.
It sounds like this time of intense spiritual searching also came with a growing sense of responsibility for others.
Totally. He wasn't content with just achieving personal enlightenment. He wanted to use his wisdom and compassion to actually help people.
There's that famous quote, "They alone live who live for others." I feel like he truly lived by that.
He did. His travels gave him firsthand knowledge of the struggles people faced, and he became passionate about finding practical solutions. He wanted to improve sanitation, agriculture, education. He had this dream of giving villagers the resources to improve their own lives, empowering them.
It's interesting how that practicality shows up even in the middle of all his spiritual pursuits.
He believed that real spirituality had to be grounded in action and compassion. It wasn't just about fancy ideas, it was about actually doing something to reduce suffering and make a positive impact.
And there's that story about the advice he gave to his disciple who was always worried about getting sick and dying.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. He basically said, what's the point of obsessing over disease? Be happy, live a good life, think positive thoughts, enjoy yourself. But don't go overboard and do things that'll hurt you or make you regretful.
It's such simple advice, but so powerful. It's about finding joy in life while being aware of our actions and their impact.
It's like a perfect snapshot of his balanced approach, blending spirituality with practical wisdom.
So with all this traveling, all these encounters, all these insights, something starts to shift for Vivekananda. A new idea takes shape, and it comes from a pretty unexpected source.
Right. During his travels through Gujarat, he spends time with some scholars studying old Sanskrit texts. And he has a really important talk with the Prime Minister of Junagadh.
Oh, okay. What did the Prime Minister tell him? It sounds like a big moment.
Well, he suggested that Vivekananda should take his message to the West, share his ideas with people in other parts of the world. He thought people in the West would be open to his ideas and that he could have an even bigger impact on a global scale.
That's a huge suggestion. What did Vivekananda think about that?
He wasn't sure at first. Remember, he was still wrestling with that internal struggle, personal liberation versus serving humanity.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a tough call. On one hand, you want to deepen your own spiritual practice, and on the other hand, there's this chance to share your wisdom with the world.
Exactly. And as we'll see in the last part of our deep dive, his trip through South India ultimately leads him to embrace this idea, and it sets the stage for his famous journey to America.
So we left off with Vivekananda considering this big idea, taking his message to the West. It seems like a major turning point for him.
Oh, it was. And as he traveled through South India, that struggle just kept going. He was talking to intellectuals, getting into these deep philosophical discussions, and all the while that suggestion from the Prime Minister of Junagadh, was really sticking with him.
Yeah, he must have felt like something big was about to happen, like destiny was calling or something.
Oh, totally. And it's in South India that we see another side of him. That sharp wit and boldness we talked about, It really comes out. He had this fascinating encounter with the Maharaja of Mysore.
Okay, tell me about it.
Well, the Maharaja was clearly impressed by Vivekananda's intelligence, but he had all these courtiers, a whole court full of people who thought they were pretty important. So one day the Maharaja asked Vivekananda for his honest opinion of his courtiers.
Oh, I bet they were all ears for that one. What did Vivekananda say?
Well, he just comes right out and says, "I think your highness has a good heart, but unfortunately all your courtiers are just a bunch of flatterers. Courtiers are the same everywhere you go."
Oh man, I can only imagine how the courtiers felt about that.
Yeah, they were not happy. The Maharaja tried to stick up for his prime minister, saying he was a smart and trustworthy guy. But then Vivekananda, with perfect timing, he just throws out this line, "But your highness, a prime minister is just someone who robs the Maharaja and pays the political agent."
That's classic Vivekananda, using humor to make a pretty serious point. I'm surprised he got away with saying stuff like that.
Well, the Maharaja had a sense of humor, luckily. He just told Vivekananda to be a little more careful in the future, for his own sake. But it really shows you how committed Vivekananda was to the truth, even if it meant ticking off some powerful people.
It seems like nothing could stop him from speaking his mind.
You're right. He even said, "What do you think an honest sannyasin is afraid to speak the truth, even if it costs him his life?"
His courage is incredible. It's a good reminder for all of us that sometimes standing up for what we believe in means taking some risks.
For sure. And speaking of risks, after Mysore, he traveled to Ramaswaram. It's a sacred place for Hindus, a pilgrimage site. And this is where things really changed for him.
What happened at Ramaswaram?
He met the Raja of Ramnad, Bhaskara Setapati, who actually became one of his most dedicated disciples. And they had these deep conversations about Vivekananda's ideas for helping the Indian people, especially those in the villages.
It's amazing how these chance encounters, they played such a huge role in shaping his path.
It really shows you how open Vivekananda was and how willing he was to connect with people from all walks of life. It was during one of these talks with the Raja that the Parliament of Religions in Chicago came up.
Ah, that's the moment. That seed that was planted earlier is finally starting to grow.
Right. The Raja saw how Vivekananda could connect Eastern and Western thought, and he encouraged him to go to the Parliament, to represent Hinduism on a world stage.
So what did Vivekananda think? Was he ready for something that big?
He hesitated at first. Remember, he was still struggling with that whole inner conflict, personal spiritual goals versus helping humanity. But the Raja's encouragement and his own growing sense of a global mission, it eventually won him over.
I imagine it must have been a tough decision to leave India and go to a completely new place.
It was. But the Raja Ramnad offered to help. He gave him financial support and just moral support too. It made the decision a bit easier.
It's really incredible how all these little moments, these conversations, these encounters, they all led Vivekananda to his destiny. It shows you the power of connecting with people and being open to new things.
I couldn't agree more. It really shows how willing Vivekananda was to step out of his comfort zone and take on a path that would completely change his life and bring his message of universal love and tolerance to the whole world.
This deep dive into Vivekananda's early life has been amazing. From the simple life at Baranagar Math to his humor and wisdom in those encounters with Maharajas, we've seen how those early years made him who he was and shaped his vision for the future. What stands out to you most about his journey as a wandering monk?
I think it's his constant growth. You know how willing he was to challenge himself and keep learning? He wasn't afraid to question what he believed or to learn from people who were different from him. And through all that spiritual seeking, he never forgot about his compassion for people and his desire to make a positive impact on the world.
I think that's what makes him such a powerful figure even today. He represents this beautiful balance between personal spiritual growth and responsibility for others. He shows us that true spirituality isn't about escaping the world, but engaging with it, with compassion and courage.
Exactly. And as we think about his journey, it makes me wonder what parts of his message resonate with you the most. What can we learn from his life that we can apply to our own journeys of self-discovery and our own efforts to make the world a better place?
That's a great question, and one I hope our listeners will really think about. I think Vivekananda's life gives us this timeless message of hope. It reminds us that even when things are really tough, we can find strength in our own beliefs, in our relationships with others, and in working towards a greater purpose. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the early life of Swami Vivekananda. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep searching for that which connects us all.
I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.